Hello, everybody. Today is day 324, and we're reading from Luke chapter 23 and John 18 and 19. It's interesting that many of the accusations that have been leveled at Jesus are, again, much of what we are accused of today as Christians. He was accused of perverting the nation. He was accused of stirring up the people, also of misleading the people. The fact that he declared himself to be the anointed one, King of the Jews, something that today is offensive, in the which we believe that Jesus is the anointed one and the only means by which one can get to the Father. And the issue of taxes, they accused him of encouraging people not to pay taxes, and that wasn't, of course, the truth. And we also will hedge when it comes to taxes because of the many corrupt things that it will go towards, such as abortion. I've considered the eternal consequences of those who, and the decisions they made with Jesus on that fateful day when Jesus died. All the characters that were involved, all of the responses, and how they treated Jesus. Were there, and obviously, eternal consequences associated with them. You've got Herod, who hoped to see this Jesus a sideshow, a magic maybe encounter of the miracles that he had heard that Jesus had performed. And yet Herod treated Jesus with contempt, as did all of his soldiers there, and they mocked him and they blasphemed him. I wonder what kind of things, eternal consequences, that Herod ponders to this day. I consider Pilate, who indeed wished to release Jesus. He actually had the power to do so, but he feared, and he did fear Jesus, because when he talks about being a king and makes reference to truth, Pilate is startled by that, then does everything he can to prevent them from crucifying him or executing him. And yet Pilate caves to the crowd. I wonder what kind of eternal considerations that plague Pilate to this day. Then I think of the multitudes who had previously, who certainly had become manipulated pawns. Many had previously praised Jesus and had been recipients of the miracles of Jesus. No doubt were part of the mass crowd that prior to this, where they are declaring him, worshiping him and praising him, and now they're crying for him to be crucified. They crumbled under political manipulation, and they were followers of the crowd. And I wonder if all those that were represented are their regrets in eternity. Some of those who never truly came to the point of experiencing the truth of who Jesus was. I've considered the Sanhedrin, the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and the jealousy they had, and the envy and the hatred they had for Jesus. They deceived an entire nation. And you've got Caiaphas, who prophesies and doesn't even realize it, and yet sentence him to death, really affirming that he needed to be put to death, and they were all a part of mocking and blaspheming Jesus. What kind of eternal regrets must these represent the religious crowd, as they now have nothing but to realize that they themselves had been deceived? All the soldiers, they were a part of mocking Jesus and striking him and blaspheming him and making fun of him. One soldier who did take pause at the cross, in which he said, "This must have been the Son of God." But those, think about it, what is on the eternal backdrop? The one who drove the nails, the one who cracked the whip, and the one who pierced his side. These are individuals, no doubt, that looking back would be filled with all kinds of regrets that they had participated in it. Then you've got Barabbas, the notorious criminal, who was released in Jesus's place. For the most holy man that had ever lived, the crowd selected Barabbas, and Barabbas leaves, no doubt, his confinement prison giddy and glad, taking little consideration of the man that he was replacing. what kind of regrets, what kind of thoughts must Barabbas made if he never actually came to the point of repenting and getting right? The thieves on the cross, you've got the one who mocks Jesus and taunts him by saying, if you save yourself and save us if you are the Son of God. But you've got the one who lives because he declares, remember me when you enter into your kingdom. And Jesus declaring that I'll be there, you'll be there with me. So one dies in eternal regret and one lives in eternal bliss. And what about Joseph of Arimathea, who the Bible describes as a disciple, the one who gave his grave, his spot for Jesus, who was concerned about Jesus' proper burial and taking him down from the cross, who went to Pilate, who risked, obviously, the ramifications of this, or Nicodemus, who had that early conversation, you must be born again, and yet we see him as a secret disciple who's there with Joseph Arimathea, helping to take care of the burial of Jesus. Or Simon the Cyrenian, who bore the cross of Christ. All of these, I think, of the eternal regrets or the eternal gratefulness that they must have had, considering the choices that were made and the rewards that they would reap. But there's one, or even Judas, think about it, who walked with Jesus, who had been deceived, of whom Jesus said that it had been better that man had never been born. What eternity is like for those who had been deceived and who had given over to the flesh. But there's one major thing to consider. They all represent us. Jesus pre-forgave. It's interesting. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. That's the very nature of God. That's the grace extended, because none of us are deserving of it. But you and I have forgiveness if we choose to receive it, to embrace it. Did they accept that pre-forgiveness? Were there soldiers who came to the awareness of their need of Christ? Were there those in the religious crowd that eventually they had a revelation and they came to receive this? All of those who were part of this, but the act is that the point is that forgiveness was available to each and every one. They didn't know what they were doing. That was the words of Jesus. They did not know what they were doing. But we today are without excuse, because we do know. We have the written revelation of God's sacred scriptures, and we have the words that have been propagated around the world that have given to us an awareness of who Jesus was and the suffering that he was submitted to and his triumphant resurrection. And that leaves it in our hands of how we will respond to Jesus Christ. Will we accept him or reject him? If we reject him, we are far worse off than any of these that were present on the day that Jesus died. If we accept him, we will be recipients of the wonderful grace, love, and blessing of God, and we will be fully and absolutely forgiven. Thank God that we have that word given to us, and if we will receive it in faith, we will receive the abundance of God's goodness.